Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to this East West Railway Company online session with your neighbouring parishes and councillors along Cambourne. We also have like Huntingdonshire and Central Beds in this part of the route. Representative joining us tonight. My name is Jordi Vespecha and I'm one of the engagement managers here at EWRCO. And we're pleased that you can join us to this second meeting following on from the one that we held back in April on the first week of consultation. As advised on the invitation for tonight's session, so the session really is an opportunity for you to raise any outstanding questions that you or your residents might have on our proposals, now that you've had a chance to read through the documents, and also we're guessing like residents have been in touch with you and raised kind of questions of their own. We want to ensure that basically we've tackled your key questions before you submit your response to a consultation, really. For that, ahead of today's session, we ask you to let us know if there were any questions or issues that you wanted us to address during the meeting. Thank you to those of you who've written to us. If you haven't, no problem. We have allocated plenty of time for Q&A. To let you know that we're holding similar sessions with all the parishes and councillors within the consultation zone between Oxford and Cambridge throughout this week. And in terms of structure, just to quickly touch on, so we're gonna first start with a brief presentation that's gonna run for around like half an hour, in which basically we're gonna provide like a brief recap of what it is that we're consulting on in your area. Then we're going to touch on some key questions that have been raised so far through either directly by you or previous public webinars, live chats, correspondence, in like that are relevant to your area. Then we're going to move on to a Q&A session that should run for like 45 to 50 minutes. So plenty of time for you to raise questions, and then we're going to wrap up. So overall, hopefully we should just keep you for 90 minutes tonight. Said that, I'm joined by a wide range of my colleagues who will introduce themselves as they take part on the session, as well as a couple of colleagues from ACOM and Barley who are supporting us holding this session tonight. But before we start with the actual presentation, let me just quickly run you through some housekeeping and Zoom etiquette note. By now, I mean, most of you might be familiar with the platform that we're using, but just as a reminder, you'll find in the bar below your screen different features, which include like the buttons to mute and unmute yourself, sharing your camera, opening the chat window, or checking the list of participants. During the session, we'd be grateful if you could rename yourself in case that like your Zoom account actually doesn't show your actual name already. And we're also gonna ask if you could keep yourself muted at all times unless you're given the floor during the Q&A, just to avoid those kind of like unpleasant echoes or kind of like noises that sometimes can happen when more than one mic is on. If you experience any technical issues during the meeting, please email contact@eastwestrail.co.uk. We're going to be monitoring the inbox, and we would try to kind of get you back in if you couldn't. And then in terms of the Q&A, as I've mentioned, plenty of time for questions. We're going to open the floor. So if you want to ask a question, please indicate so by pressing the raise your hand button, which you can find inside either the reactions button, the top right of the bottom of your screen, or depending on which version of Zoom you're using, I think it's also within the list of participants, bottom right. Finally, the session tonight is being recorded, and the recording of the session, as well as the slides that we're presenting, are going to be available on our website next week. And before I hand over to Ian, if we can have the slides, and I can quickly show you who have we invited tonight, just so you're kind of aware of who's joining you in this session. Catherine, if we could have the, I think it's like 1 or 2 slides in, and basically you'll be able to see in a map all the parishes. So one more, next one, there we go. So these are, so if we can go back just one, yes, brilliant. So these are all the parishes that we have invited tonight, and some of you, I can see that are here. If we move on to the next slide, we also have invited the ward councillors of all these different areas, and finally the following county councillors on the next slide. Without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Ian so he can kick off with the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Jordi. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ian Parker. I'm the Programme Delivery Director for East West Rail. And essentially my role is to ensure that that we design and then ultimately construct the right solution, the right railway solution. So I'm going to host the first part of tonight's presentation, but I'm conscious that we want to try and give most time over to questions. So we'll go through some overview slides very quickly, because I think, you know, we're this far into the consultation, you probably already have a fairly good idea of what it's all about. So if we go on to the next slide, thank you. So we are going to have a very brief recap just to tell you a little bit about what we're consulting on. As I say, I'm sure you're already aware of the purpose of this consultation, but we'll just very briefly cover that. We'll then talk about some of the key themes that are emerging in this consultation, and questions that what we've tried to do is group questions together that have been asked by people in this part of along this part of the route, so that we can hopefully at least begin to address some of the most commonly asked questions before we then explain a bit about how you can further get involved, get your communities involved in this area, and then, as I say, we'll put as much time as we can during the 90 minutes to Q&A, so that you can ask us about other things. So if we move on to the next slide, thank you. Well, move on to the one after that, I think is probably best. So what are we consulting on? Well, we've got a 10-week consultation, which we're well into now, which started at the end of March. The consultation is covering two things really. One is to talk about the emerging proposals for the development of the railway between Oxford and Cambridge, and you'll see in the consultation documents we've tried to break that down into a number of sections. This conversation tonight is about section D, which is the section between Clapham Green and the Eversdons. But also we're trying to gain people's views on the type of customer experience that that you need and want as potential future customers of East West Rail. So if we move on to the next slide, what it shows here is the area in which we're consulting. And you can see that we're covering the whole area right the way through from Oxford to Cambridge. And the reason for that is, for the second of the two purposes of this consultation, what we're trying to understand from people who are likely future users of the railway is what sort of experience are you looking for? What type of service do you want us to provide? And that's why we're going slightly beyond the physical area in which we're planning to do work during these future phases of the project, to just get a general picture of what sort of railway we need to develop. That takes me on quite nicely to the next section. In this slide, what you can see is a graphic just to illustrate the end-to-end journey that we're trying to gain more information about. So what we're trying to understand from potential future users of our railway, future customers, is how you find out about the service, how you plan your journey, how you'd wish to plan your journey, how you'll get to and from our stations, because the first mile, last mile piece is really important in terms of understanding and just being sure that we get stations in the right place, frankly, and how you'll connect with them. Then when you get to the station, what are you expecting? What what services and facilities would you like to see at the stations? Is it simply a shelter and a ticket machine, or is it something more sophisticated than that? Could it include shops? Could it include car parks, places to store bicycles and that kind of thing? Then we're trying to understand a bit more about the experience on the platform and boarding the train. So, you know, what are your needs as users of the railway, getting on and off trains? And then, of course, what service do you require when you're on the train? Because not only is our role in East West Rail about developing the railway, it's also about running the railway service once the railway is complete. So it's really important for us to understand, for these sort of medium length journeys, in some cases quite short journeys possibly, what type of facilities and services you need on the train, and you know what that experience feels like in terms of dealing with the staff that we put on the trains. And then finally, we need to understand a bit more about your ongoing journey. What type of journeys are you going to use East West Rail for? And again, first mile, last mile piece at the end of your journey, to understand what other connectivity you need. So yes, so just moving on to the next slide, then we've summarised that in those five bullets. So, you know, there's the train service itself, there's the experience you get at the station and travelling to and from the station. There's the train experience whilst you're on your journey. What type of interaction you need with railway staff, and what type of information we need to provide you with. So we'll move on now to the other part of our consultation, which is, if we move to the next slide, as you can see, the areas with the coloured boxes are the areas in which we physically will be carrying out some work during the course of the development of the railway. The section between Bicester and Bletchley, as I'm sure you know, we're already working on, so that's in its construction stage now. So there's no information about that, of course, in our consultation, because that already has gained its powers to be allowed to be constructed. But elsewhere, we're looking at the works that need to be done in each of these areas. And if we just now focus in on section D, which is the sort of yellowy orange colour that you can see at the top of this plan. If we move on to the next slide, please. Or in fact, let's move on to the one after that. So section D is the section between Bedford and Cambridge. It's the section where we've identified a number of options for our route. You can see here we've identified 5 options, all of which we're consulting on, although we have expressed our preference for 2 of those options, which we believe best meet the needs of the programme. So just very briefly talking about those, route option 8, which is the orangey yellow coloured alignment that goes straight across the plan. In effect, we're using this as our reference alignment. It's the shortest route. It connects the station south of the south of the proposed route of the A428 near Thamesford, and then a station south of Cambourne. As I say, it's our reference alignment because it is the shortest, and it's the route which most closely follows the route E that we identified after the last consultation. And what we've done is we've compared it with. Oh, I'm getting some feedback here. Thank you. We've compared it with the other alignments. So route alignment 1 is the sort of dark bluish coloured alignment that runs from north of Bedford, crosses the A1, and then follows the route of the proposed Highways England scheme, the A428 Black Cat to Caxton Gibbet. Follows that from St Neots up to a station in Cambourne North. Alignment 2 is pretty similar actually, except rather than going to Cambourne North, it swings south, crosses the A428 just to the west of Cambourne there, and forms a station southwest of Cambourne. Alignment 6, which is the light blue option, doesn't follow the route of the A428, but it does cross the A428 near St Neots, and then again follows cross country to a station in Cambourne South. And then there's the purple alignment, finally the purple alignment, which it's quite hard to see on here actually, but runs from crosses the A1 south of Black Cat roundabout, forms a new station at Tempsford, and then continues under the proposed A428 and follows that corridor again right the way around to a station north of Cambourne. So those are the alignments that we're consulting on. If we move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in this section, I'm going to hand over to Paul, one of my colleagues, and Paul's going to take you through some of the questions that generally have been raised about the route alignment options. So Paul, do you want to pick up from here, please?
Sure, thanks, Ian. Yes, so my name is Paul Sparrow. I work on the CS3 team, so connection stage 3 team between Bedford and Cambridge as a program manager. I'm just going to go through a couple of questions that we've been receiving throughout the consultation so far and provide some answers to those. So the first one we've received, we're going to go through is the North Cambourne alignments are only possible if you come through Highfields Caldecott. But you have failed to account for the Bourne Airfield development and the Linden Homes development. One, can EWR tell us how they're going to address this glaring omission, since it changes most of your environmental analysis? And two, why haven't you reached out to the developers of these sites? So I think the first thing to say is that we were aware of these developments as we were developing the alignment options. The key points are, certainly if I deal with the Linden Homes development first at All Angels Park, this is something that we think at the moment that the current alignment catches the edge of this park, but we think with some value management work at the next stage of design, that is something that we could avoid altogether. That being said, the railway will obviously be close to that location. And in terms of Bourne development, we have got a conversation coming up with the developer. We understand that this development has got outline planning permission as of February of this year. And that outline planning permission is for 500 homes of the proposed 3,500. Also, we understand that there's a reserved matters application required before construction starts. The planning permission is also reliant upon a decent public transport connection provided to the site. And at the moment, we can see from the documentation that this is associated with a bus route between Cambourne and Cambridge. So we were aware of this development, and I think through that outline planning permission that's been given and the connection to public transport, there is, I think, a good opportunity here where East West Rail could actually provide that public transport link, and that's something that we'll be certainly having a conversation with the developer Countryside very soon. So with everything, we will be, another thing that should be said and is highlighted in Appendix D to the technical report is that we will be looking at some value management works about how the railway crosses the A428 at this location. At the moment, the design shows it going over, so the railway going over the road, but we will look at an option to see whether or not we will be able to put the road over the railway, and that has the potential to reduce the footprint in the area. So those are the key points. Our environmental analysis in terms of this is constantly being updated. This was taken into account both from a business case and environment perspective, but obviously with any further information that we get in terms of these sites, particularly once we've looked at further value management works and how we can perhaps mitigate some of the impacts, we will be updating that environmental analysis. So the next question, what is the impact of your planned alignments between North Cambourne Station or a South Cambourne Station and Cambridge South on local infrastructure such as roads and rights of way? Thank you for this question. It's particularly important to us. It's important to us because we understand how vital those connections are to the communities in the area. Public rights of way we know that public rights of way are used not just for leisure activities, which is absolutely vital, and particularly I think over the last year we've all appreciated those, but also for things like in some areas they're used for routes to access school. Similarly with local roads, we know that if you close one road in the area, it can mean a significant detour for people that it becomes unviable. So our policy has been to keep local roads and rights of way open as much as we possibly can. And that is actually one of the reasons why the alignment is running at its vertical profile in some areas, because we are making sure that we keep the roads open. Now, we will be at the next stage, as I mentioned before, next stage of design, looking at some value management where we could see if we can lower the railway and put a number of those roads over the top of the railway. So keeping local infrastructure open is really key. We do have further work to do to understand what the solutions will be at each location during construction in terms of temporary solutions whilst the permanent railway and road solutions are built, and we'll be presenting that information in the next consultation. But our policy is to keep roads and right of way open. So looking next at, I think we've got one question here for design proposals. Sorry, two questions. So first one is, our members have concerns about the erection of an 11-metre high viaduct. So we appreciate that that the vertical alignment of this railway in some areas is high, and the quote of an 11-metre viaduct is correct in some areas. These viaducts have been put in those areas to cover rails, the road, let me start that again, to be able to get the railway over roads in some places, and also to be able to mitigate the impacts of the railway in some flood zones so that we don't take up significant flood zone space and push the floods elsewhere. Now, for the flood zones, we need to carry out some further work with the Environment Agency to see, to confirm the solution, and also see if actually the railway could help in some flood mitigation in some of the areas, i.e. stop some of the flooding and its impact on communities, so on people's houses. And in other areas, as I previously mentioned, we'll be looking to see if we can lower the railway to go at grade with the roads then going over the top. And this will mean a reduction in those viaducts. And the reason why the design is as it is at the moment is because we needed to design to reasonable worst case. We've got further work that we need to do. We haven't been able to get out on site and do significant surveys over the last year, as everybody will be aware. And so it's been very important to us that we're not over optimistic with our design too early on and then find that we have to go higher than we originally anticipated. And that gets presented at the statutory consultation. So what we've done is we've made sure that we're not overly optimistic, made sure that it's a railway that could be built. And then as we get more survey information in, and as we get to look at certain sites in more detail, particularly where if there is a reduction, if we're looking at fewer alignments as we go through, then we've got the opportunity to see if there's some genuine value management work that we can do in reducing these alignments, and which would help with some of the visual impacts. We'll also be looking at landscape design to see how we can use natural landscape design to be able to help screen some of the visual impacts as well. The second question then is about trench technology. So why are you not looking into trench technology for this section of the route? We know that this is a question that has been raised. So the suggestion we have seen has been put forward by some of the campaign groups in the area. And it's something that we will do more of an assessment on. I'm certainly conscious of some of the pictures that have been put up on those campaign group sites of where it's been used. They are actually pictures of approaches to tunnels. You will always have some sort of trench as you approach a tunnel. That is a design that will always happen because you're transferring from either elevated or at grade to get yourself to an underground position. It is true that trenches have been used in other parts of the world for specific areas. However, I am not aware of entire lengths of railway being put into trenches. We need to carry out a proper assessment of this to see whether or not there's any benefit to using trenches in these areas, particularly where the water table is so high. We do understand that it is possible to mitigate the high water table effects, but what is key and what we need to consider is that this is a balance of different factors, of which we would need to consider total capital cost of putting everything in a trench, of maintenance costs if siphons and active pumping is required in the trench. Those are all assets that need to be maintained, and if they fail, can cause significant problems for the railway. And also, it has to be said that concrete is the largest carbon contributor in the construction industry, and whilst we know we can't remove the need to use concrete in its entirety from the scheme, an example is where we need to be putting in the viaducts to get over floodplains. It's certainly something that we wouldn't want to increase the use of the material, or the use of that material, if it is not actually required. So those are all considerations that we'll be looking at going forward, and we'll be able to present something at the next consultation. Next, please. And I'll now hand over to Kirsty.
Hello, thanks, Paul. Hi, I'm Kirsty Young. I'm the head of programme consents on East West Rail, and I'm the lead of the land team as well. So there are a couple of specific questions that have been asked on property, but I know obviously with building a new railway in this area, obviously the impacts upon the existing landowners is a key issue for us and for the local community. So I'll just start by kind of just giving a little bit of a quick recap in terms of what we're currently doing to sort of engage and to work with landowners, and then I'll come on to the specific questions that have been asked ahead of this session. We just ahead of the consultation, we contacted the landowners that are potentially affected by the proposals that we're currently consulting on, really to sort of make them obviously aware of what sort of potential impact those proposals may have on their land holding, and to discuss that with them and to sort of understand basically what the impacts might be, and to look ahead at how we might minimise and mitigate those where we are taking forward those proposals. And we've had a number of meetings with landowners. We're continuing to do that to the end of consultation, and we will continue to engage with landowners as we move forward into design. We have a dedicated team sort of working with myself from Ardent, our land and property specialists, who have now joined us as a long-term partner. So they are here for the duration of project as well, so we can maintain consistency as we're working with landowners and others in the affected area. And as well as the landowners, it's also looking at the community in terms of occupiers and residents within those properties too. One of the one of the potential impacts of a scheme like this could be sort of potential impacts upon people trying to sell their property. When you publish the proposals, that could have a knock-on effect if people have a pressing need to sell, but are actually unable to do that at the market value because of the maybe uncertainty around about whether that property is going to be required for the project in the future. So there is statutory provision for that further down the line that kicks in really when a development consent order is submitted. Which is obviously some period down the line. So we're currently consulting on a discretionary purchase scheme, which we call our need to sell scheme, which it aims to really help property owners in that position who have a need to sell and would experience hardship if they're unable to sell, for example, maybe missing out on a job relocation or something of that nature, an income change. So there may be we're consulting on a scheme that would aim to support them and to help them in that. So I would encourage anybody to have a look at that scheme. It's on that you can get to it from the consultation pages. Have a look. Please do feed in your views or encourage landowners, residents in your area to feed their views into us on the scheme. And we are having those meetings with landowners, and as I said, they will continue sort of going on as we move through the scheme. We're really at an early stage at the moment, but we want to hear from people about how our proposals may affect them. If we could move on, I think, just to the next slide. There's some specific questions that have come in ahead of this session. Just looking at the first two, I'll link them together because they're linked. First one is, when judging the impact on housing, what distances matter? And leading on from that, where is that distance measured from, i.e. the centre of the rail tracks or from the end toe of an embankment? The way I would answer that really at the moment is we haven't set a fixed distance. For example, if you look at our need to sell scheme, as well as looking to sort of bring that mitigation forward in terms of not waiting for the development consent order to be submitted, we've also looked at how our proposals may affect properties not just within the actual line of route, but also potentially adjacent to the line of route if they are also affected in terms of the value of their property, and that causes difficulties for people in selling. So we haven't set a fixed distance from that in the main, because what we've said is distance is one of the factors that may affect impact upon property, but there are also other circumstances like the nature of the property, the nature of the existing sort of topography, the nature of the potential railway, i.e. sort of viaduct, embankment, cuttings, what sort of mitigation you can offer. So we've not sought to sort of define, if you're within this limit you're in, or if you're over it you're out, sort of thing. It's very much on a kind of case by case basis to sort of understand what the impact may be. The second sort of set to sort of questions 3 and 4 there, it says HS2 has compensation of 3 bands from 120 metres to 180, 180 to 240, 240 to 300, and asks, does EWR use the same parameters and will they offer similar amounts? And the second part, which is linked, is where's the distance for compensation measured from, i.e. is it different from, i.e. is it linked to the centre of the rail tracks or really from the end toe of an embankment? So again, taking those two together, the compensation schemes that are listed there for HS2, it's the rural support zone and also the homeowner payments, and they're really operating in sort of different bands, kind of going from sort of adjacent to the railway out to a sort of distance. And obviously, the closer you are to the railway, potentially, the greater the offer of compensation potentially sort of there. Currently, at the moment, East West Rail is not offering a similar compensation scheme. One of the things we do ask when we are consulting on our current need to sell scheme is we have asked people whether they feel that is the right help that we need to offer. And we are encouraging people to feed in, their views to us, basically, if they feel that there are other offers that they think would be required to sort of mitigate potential impacts, etc. So I would suggest that anybody should either feed any comments in via the need to sell consultation or via the general consultation in terms of what impacts upon properties they're concerned about, and sort of what mitigation means that we should be looking at, I guess both from an environmental perspective but then also in terms of a property compensation perspective. I will hand over, I think, to the if we move on to the next slide, we'll see who we are handing over to. So I'm handing over to Tristan on environment. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty, and good evening, everyone. My name's Tristan. I'm one of the environment team here at East West Rail. So like my colleagues, I'm going to come on to a couple of questions that we've asked. But just firstly, before I do that, it's important to note that environment and sustainability is at the core of what we're trying to do here at East West Rail. We want to deliver a genuinely sustainable form of transport for the community. And to do this, we make sure we consider all environmental topics from the outset. This means for us, we've established an environmental sustainability policy, which you can find on our website. And within this policy, we've set out 9 key principles. So this is things like carbon, biodiversity, landscape, noise. And it's these principles that we use when we're working with our design teams, so with Paul, for example, to ensure they're considered at the beginning of the design process so that we can focus on avoiding and minimising impacts on communities and the environment right from the outset. As a final point, it's good to mention that we are very early in the project at the moment, and whilst we recognise that communities and stakeholders such as yourselves are keen to understand the specific impacts of the scheme, it will be a statutory consultation where we publish our preliminary environmental information report, and then within the subsequent environmental statement, which will be submitted alongside the development consent order, where we'll provide significant detail as to the potential impacts of the scheme and our proposed mitigations. So let's pop on to the next slide, please. So the first question is around diesel, and it's, we would want to see some form of propulsion other than diesel, as the council has pledged their residents that they'll be carbon neutral by 2030. It goes without saying the climate emergency is clearly very, very important to us, and very important, kind of full stop. What we can say at the moment is that although no commitment has yet been made by the government to electrify the railway between Oxford and Cambridge, we will need to ensure that railway aligns with relevant policy, that's local and national, and it complies with relevant legislation related to net zero carbon efforts. In 2018, the government challenged the rail industry to produce a vision for the removal of all diesel-only trains from the network by 2040, and we're absolutely committed to making sure that we can run a sustainable railway in the long term. That means reducing emissions, including things like nitrogen oxides and also particulates. To that end, at the moment, we're exploring how we can introduce new and emerging technologies in our long-term train fleets. And we'll be seeking input from bidders across the market to ensure that they understand our environmental goals. As I mentioned earlier, this is the sort of information that we'll bring forward in our during statutory consultation within our preliminary environmental information report, alongside other details about how we are going to meet our net zero aspirations and what the targets are that we're setting ourselves. So next question is around noise and whether will there be any noise mitigation designs considered for this line, and if so, what will they be? The short and very easy answer is yes, there absolutely will be. So we recognise that the noise is going to be a key concern for residents and communities near to the railway. And as with all our proposals, the impact of the environment is a fundamental part of our decision making, including potential or possible mitigations. This includes all potential environmental impacts such as noise, but also things like the visual impact of the scheme as well. It's important to note that the government does have a noise policy statement called the Noise Policy Statement for England. And we're developing the project in line with this, including the aim to avoid and minimise negative impacts on the health and quality of life of local residents and the communities alongside the East West Rail route. In terms of what those measures could actually look like, the first thing we'll do is consider things like the choice of trains that we actually use, as some trains can be noisier than others. But we'll also think about track technology, as this can also influence noise levels. But once we've managed to reduce the noise at source, so that's the noise coming from the rail and the tracks itself, we'll then identify where we need to implement measures like noise barriers, which could take the form of landscaping, but they could also take the form of things like acoustic fencing. As part of identifying these measures, we use industry-leading computer modelling, which takes account of things like buildings, so potential screening caused by those, but also the topography to predict noise at communities and ensure that we're mitigating this appropriately. Again, this is the type of information, mitigation details that we'll provide within our preliminary environmental information report, and then also within the environmental statement that we submit alongside the development consent order. So that's all from me for now, and I'll pass back over to Ian.
Okay, thanks, Tristan. We're nearly at the end of the presentation, and as I say, we'll be spending the rest of the session taking questions from you. Our approach to consultation, and I suppose before we get onto the questions, I'll just say, you know, our approach has been influenced by obviously by the current pandemic. It is an entirely virtual consultation. There haven't been any face-to-face meetings, and frankly, we just can't do that at the moment. However, we followed government guidance on what constitutes a consultation in these slightly unusual times that we're in, so we've consulted in a whole variety of ways, ranging from, you know, the publication of some of the documents I've got on my desk here, the consultation documents which have been sent through people's doors and can be downloaded or applied from online. Sorry about that. It's probably the evening meetings. Also, we've done a lot of events online. We'll talk to you a little bit more about them in a moment. In terms of the questions then on the consultation itself. So the first question is, will we extend the consultation to allow for face-to-face events? Well, the short answer is we've decided that we won't. The consultation will end on the 9th of June as we planned. It's been a 10-week consultation. We recognised when we set out on this consultation that it would span an election period, and for that reason, we've extended the consultation well beyond the May elections, the early May elections, to give newly elected councillors time to respond to the consultation, and we think that the time that we've allowed for that is sufficient. As you can see, things are progressing with COVID, and there's still no certainty around when sort of face-to-face events can begin again. But we are satisfied that based on all the advice that's available, that this has been a valid consultation, and, you know, frankly, we've had a huge response. We've gained a lot of information from it, and you know, we will use all that information in the right way in order to shape our future designs. Which brings me on to the next two questions, which I'll probably take together actually. How will we analyse the feedback, and when will we know which route alignment option has been selected? Well, the next stage, once the consultation finishes, is obviously that we go through all, we've already started it, in fact, we go through all the information that's been received all the way along the route. As I say, it's been a pretty big response, and, you know, actually this information is really valuable to us. Genuinely, we need to understand what people's preferences are and what people think of the proposals, and this is a really good time to help us shape the future proposals. So we'll analyse all of that. We'll break it down by sections in much the same way as you'll see we've presented the scheme, and then we'll produce a consultation report. Consultation report, very much a factual report, describing all of the data that's been received and how we've analysed that. But then we'll also produce a report setting out our preferred alignment, our preferred route alignment for this section, because a lot of the sections of the route, of course, are of a fixed alignment. We've identified that already, but in the section we've been talking about this evening, there are choices to be made, and we will publish that. The likelihood is that will be towards the end of the year, because the preferred route announcement will be made by the Secretary of State once we've carried out all the analysis and confirmed our preference. So if we move on to the next slide then, please. how you can get your communities involved. Well, you know, as I say, the feedback is really important at this stage to us. It's a time where we don't have a firm view on the solution, and so, you know, we're really pleased to get the feedback. We're doing that in a variety of ways. Virtual consultation rooms, or a room, is open on our website. That's been open since towards the beginning of the consultation, and will stay open until the last day of consultation on the 9th of June. We are running a number of live chat events. There's we've got about 16 events, the 2-hour events, where you can get involved in a 2-way dialogue with members of our project team. We've got a dedicated phone line, which is available for people who would prefer not to contact us online. So the phone number is there. And again, there's an online feedback form, which we encourage people to fill in and send us their views up until the 9th of June. So on the next slide, what you can see, if you move on please, is there are further live chat events. The first is tomorrow evening. Then there's a chat on Saturday, and then we have 3 more in week 9 of our consultation on the 31st, the 1st, and the 2nd of June. So those are all yet to come. So moving on to the next slide then, please. As I say, you know, please encourage people to get in touch with us. The more views we get, the better, richer a picture we build up of what people think in the region. So you know, please make as many people aware of what we're doing as possible. Okay, so I think at this point we can take the slides down for now, and we can take any further questions you may have. I think Geordie is going to chair this section just to make sure that the questions get sent to the right people. So Geordie, back to you, please.
Brilliant, thanks, Ian. During the slides, there's been a few questions coming in. We can start with one of them, and then as people kind of start raising their hands, they can raise them directly. But so a question that's come in, Councillor Barry Chapman has asked, Highways England informed the A428 Alliance that part of the financial justification for the A428 improvements would be that moving the A428 eastwards would release more development land. And to clarify, he's followed up saying that part of land is east of St. Neots, where a viaduct is proposed, which would then pass through the center of the additional development land. So the question from Barry is, are we aware of these? And if so, how is it considered in our plans? I can repeat the question, or actually let Barry retell it if it was not clear, but I hope it was.
Yeah, Geordie, I can pick this one up. And I can see the question in the chat actually, so you don't need to repeat it. So I can't really comment on what Highways England has said about this, but we are working quite closely now with Highways England as the prospect of a route which is aligned with their road scheme has emerged over the last period. You know, we've talked to them about how we can bring the two schemes as close together as possible, you know, and create a single transport corridor, which has felt to us like a logical thing to do for all sorts of reasons, not least of which it actually is a good alignment. And you know, in terms of environmental impacts, we are concentrating them on a single corridor, and we can help to mitigate one another's schemes. So we're working closely with Highways England. They're a kind of a sibling arm's length body of the Department of Transport, as we are, and so both we at company level and the Department of Transport are working together to try and come up with as rational a proposal as possible. But in terms of the and I don't want to be evasive. I'm not trying to avoid your question, but I actually don't know the answer. I don't know that that is a reason for them aligning the route as they have done. But if that's what they've said, I'm sure there's some truth in that.
Brilliant, thanks, Ian. So before we continue with the questions from the chat, Nigel raised his hand. Nigel, if you want to flag your question.
Yes, of course. Yes, thank you very much. What I'd like to ask is, what plans are there for stations at places other than Cambourne? Because it's quite an interesting thing moving into Cambridge. I mean, it will help. Other stations will help the sort of traffic problems of getting into Cambridge, and it's not clear to me what plans you have on that one.
Okay, do you want me to pick that up again, Geordie?
Yeah.
So obviously we have the plan for a station at Cambourne, and there is a plan for a station at either St Neots or Tempsford, and we are looking still at both options and looking at the pros and cons of those alignments, and you know, the need for a station at one of those two locations. We're locating that station at the East Coast Main Line, so that there's the prospect of interchange between the two railways. But then also we are connecting with a station which is Network Rail's proposal, actually, rather than ours, but in South Cambridge, to connect with the biomedical campus. So that station doesn't yet exist, but is being developed by Network Rail. So there will be a link. There'll be a link there as well.
Can I just ask? I mean, what about between Cambourne and
there?
Yeah, I mean, more like sort of out in the country somewhere in the.
Yeah, no, we don't currently have
local transport, surely.
Yeah, we don't have any plans for an intermediate station between Cambourne and Cambridge South.
Is there an option to comment on that?
There's certainly the option to comment on it. Yes, yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you.
But you know, please put those comments in writing. If you think that's a valid solution, please write to us.
Brilliant, thank you, Ian and Nigel. To me, I think it's next.
Yes, hi Jodie, thank you. I have a number of questions, but I think I'll probably just maybe do 2 or 3. I know we've had conversations in the past, but I've been getting feedback, obviously, from residents in both Highfields, Caldecott, and Bourne, both of which are in my ward, and both of which will be affected whichever way it is you go. And many of them are actually quite disappointed at the level of information that you have provided, because it seems that there isn't enough that you've given for them to be able to make an informed judgment as to the pros and cons of the options. And again, today, I've heard you say that you're going to be providing environmental information, noise information, and all that sort of stuff at the statutory consultation point. But by then, you would have made a decision on a preferred alignment based on only information that you have. So how is that fair on people in this area? You're asking us to give you ideas of what we think of this route, but without the information we need to make to give you that sort of stated preference or whatever. It's a constant bugbear. So I don't think you're doing yourselves any good there. On the issue of blight on properties, at the moment, your scheme that you are talking about is only for those who need to move. And I think there was a question raised that was sent before in terms of compensation scheme as you have for HS2. Well, not you, obviously, but that exists for HS2. Because it doesn't matter what you say and what you do. This project, as huge as it is, will cause property blight. The question is, how do you actually intend to compensate for that or mitigate for it? You can't just create a scheme that's only for those who need to move and can sell, because everyone will be affected. So can you, I'd like you to be able to tell us a bit more about that. Now, the big issue here is your proposal to come across Bon Airfield. And to be honest, I am disappointed that you are only just going to talk to countryside. You say you have a conversation coming, I don't know, this week, next week, bearing in mind we're at the end of the consultation or towards the end of the consultation period. And what that says to me and to my residents is that actually you haven't really taken into account either All Angels Park or Bon Airfield. You say you were aware of it, but you talk as if, nah, it's there. When in fact, there's 150 plus units that are at stake in Bon Airfield, 9 on All Angels Park. You might be able to just skirt it, i.e. All Angels Park, but what about the blight to that development and the potentially another 74 to come? So when you look at some of these numbers, it definitely seems to us and to residents of Highfields that you really, really hadn't taken them into account at all. You are trying to say otherwise, but the things you are actually saying show that you haven't. And this idea of providing the Cambon to Cambridge busway or the alternative to it through your own scheme. I mean, you're not going to be building this till what, late 2020s, early 2030s? The link to Bon Airfield is supposed to be being delivered, I mean, within the next, what, I don't know, 2, 3 years, 5 years? So how do you propose to, and you're not supposed to be talking to countryside about it. It's the GCP you should be talking to, the Greater Cambridge Partnership and the mayor. So are you talking to them? Guys, let me stop there.
Okay, Timmy, you covered a lot of ground there, a lot of issues. What I'll do is let me take the first of those. I'll ask Kirsty to pick up the issues around blight, please, Kirsty. And then perhaps, Paul, you can pick up some of the issues around Bon Airfield, because I think you've been closer to that. In terms of the level of information that we're providing, we have actually provided a substantial amount of information. Now, it's not perfect. It's a point in time, and when it comes to consultation, there's always a judgment between how much design work you do first versus how much transparency you want to provide to the public, and to others at that point in time. So what we've tried to provide you with is our current state of understanding of the scheme and its various options. But I mean, in terms of, well, you've probably seen this, but I mean, this document is a pretty substantial technical document. I don't know if you've seen the technical report as opposed to the lighter weight summary reports, but there is quite a lot of information. It's and we're eliciting comment on the basis of what we can provide. We're telling you pretty much everything we know at this stage about the scheme, and it is going to develop, and we will end up at a position where we have more information. Now, the next stage, as you rightly say to me, is to go to a statutory consultation. So this is an options consultation. There isn't a legal requirement to consult at this point, although I think we'd be pretty unwise if we didn't, because we need to understand people's views. But at the next stage, you're quite right. We will provide a scheme for you to provide feedback on. But genuinely, that is a further opportunity to feedback. It's not, it's not a done deal at that stage by any means, and we have to take on board your feedback at that stage. So, there is a further very substantive opportunity to comment on the proposals. In between times, we're not closing the door, so we like to keep on talking to people, particularly parish councils, because you're really close to the action in terms of understanding what your residents are thinking and what the community feeling is on our proposals. So by no means are we saying you know, end of the consultation on 9th of June and we'll see you again at the statutory consultation. That isn't how it works. Certainly isn't how it works for us. So we want to maintain the dialogue. I mean, we were talking to many of you before this consultation and we want to continue that afterwards. And then you have a further opportunity, you know, as the scheme gets submitted, so that we submit a development consent application, that will lead to a 6-month review. It generally does take about 6 months by the planning inspectorate, during which time there is a further opportunity to make representations. So, you know, the stage is ahead of us as the scheme develops. Each of those stages gives you the further opportunity to make comments about the proposal. So I'll stop there and hand over to Kirsty, but hopefully that gives you at least some reassurance that this is not a done deal by any means, and there's lots of opportunity going forward to continue to share your views with us, and we really hope you do. Kirsty?
Hi, thanks, Ian. Yes, Councillor Hawkins, I mean, I think we recognise obviously the scheme that we're offering at the moment in terms of the discretionary purchase scheme that we are consulting on is for very specific circumstances. And I think one of the things that we considered at this point is we are obviously at an early stage in the project. We are at a stage where we're looking at options. We looked quite sort of carefully as well about, you know, other sort of, you know, similar schemes, development consent order schemes sort of thing, you know, what sort of schemes are available in other areas. And one of the things particularly at this stage is really sort of recognizing that where there may be specific hardship, you know, so we are at an early stage in our design. We will be sort of moving forward and developing up proposals and developing up, you know, further information sort of thing on you know, how we can mitigate impacts and sort of, you know, understand the adjacent developments. But one of the key issues that we really felt, you know, we really wanted to address at the moment is the fact that people, there may be people that actually could experience hardship, particularly at this stage of the project, because of the length maybe of time of uncertainty and things. Recognizing that is for very specific circumstances. I really would encourage people to comment, you know, that this is what this stage in the project is really all about. You know, it's for you, you know, you and sort of the residents to tell us what you're concerned about, to tell us the, you know, the areas of impact that you feel and that you seek us to mitigate, and to really feed that back in through the consultation, through both whether it's the need to sell or whether it's the general consultation. Please do that.
Well, thank you for that. Is anyone going to actually talk about the, you know, your proposal supposedly to replace the Campbell to Cambridge busway? Are you talking to the Greater Cambridge Partnership? I mean, you talk about mitigation. There is no way that you can mitigate the harm that you will cause to Highfields by creating a 10, 12 meter high viaduct and embankment straight across the entrance to our village. I mean, that is the character of the village. How do you mitigate that? Not unless you build a tunnel and put your train through the tunnel and leave our village entrance as it is today. You are going to destroy it. And not only that, a third of the village will be at the top, you know, on the other side of the embankment, and the remaining 2/3 will be further, you know, on the bottom end of the embankment. How do you mitigate that? I mean, I can tell you what our people are saying is take your railway and, you know, take it where the sun don't shine.
Yes, I do totally understand the sentiment. I really do. I appreciate that putting this railway in is always going to be a difficult thing to do. And it is literally like trying to thread the eye of a needle, and it is hard. I mean, in this particular area, and looking just north of Highfields Caldecott, this is an area where we are looking to see if we can reduce the elevation of the railway. Primarily what's driving us high in this area is getting over the A428 road. If we can bring ourselves lower and be able to get the A428 to go over the top of us, then we could substantially reduce the height of that railway, and we can then reduce the impact. you're quite right to say it's not going to remove it. And we would look at noise screening, and we would look at visual screening, particularly natural visual screening through using vegetation, which can also increase biodiversity. To your other questions about the Bourne development and the All Angels Park, we're at a very early stage of design, and we've had to do things as quickly as we can in a lockdown period. It does mean that we haven't been able to talk to absolutely everybody, but that's the point of this consultation. It's our opportunity to go out there with the options that are on the table and get your feedback, which we really do highly value. As Ian says, this is not a done deal. That's why we have options on the table. A lot of projects will go out at just the statutory consultation stage, or already with an awful lot of decisions made. We're not at that point. And this is why we appreciate the feedback and the information that you're giving us. But this is also why we are starting to have these conversations with these developers, because until we have these options on the table to be able to talk in detail, we could only talk about some theoretical situations. So that's the reason why the conversations are starting now. There are options on the table. I can see that Chris in the comment has said that a Cambourne South railway station can serve Bourne Airfield as well. And that's quite right. And please do send your formal feedback into the consultation, because those views are important to us, and they help to ensure that the decisions are made are the right ones.
And thanks, Paul. If there's no follow-up to that, I will then hand it to Paul, who has a question.
I was just going to let somebody else have the floor. I've said enough for now.
Thanks, Tommy. Paul, please.
There are several Pauls around. Are you Paul Davis? Hello?
Hello?
Which Paul did you mean? There's more than one Paul, Jody. Which one did you mean?
Oh, apologies. I meant Paul Davis. My bad.
Okay,
can you raise your hand? My bad.
Okay, fine. Are you aware that St. Neots is the biggest market town in Cambridgeshire at the moment, with a population of over 30,000 people? I say market town because behind the cities of Cambridge and Peterborough. Are you aware that in the next 5 years, the population of St. Neots will be closer to 50,000? Now, I am concerned about the route of the EWR, which goes near Wintringham Park and Love's Farm. Planning permission has been given for those areas for an additional 3,800 homes in the near future. I spoke to the Chief Executive Officer of Urban and Civic, who are the overall developers of the area, and was appalled to learn from him that as of 2 weeks ago, he had no contact with EWR. That's my point. Are you consulting with Urban and Civic about the massive development around St. Neots and the impact that a 36-metre high dual overpass will have on residents? Would you like a newly bought house under that overpass? Thank you for listening to my question.
Thank you, Paul. Paul Sparrow, or Ian, would you want to take this one?
Yeah. I mean, I can take this one. Actually, no, it's a good question. And our scheme proposals have been quite widely publicised. We have been contacted by some developers. In fact, I was talking to well, actually, it was an architect acting on behalf of a developer a few days ago. I honestly don't know whether we've been contacted by this developer. Paul might be able to tell you, but we've tried to make our consultation as visible as possible, so that developers as well as all other sort of stakeholders, you know, are aware of what questions we're asking at this stage. So, you know, in the same way that you're very aware of our proposals, we would have hoped the developers would have also recognised what we were proposing to do. And as I say, some have contacted us. I'm honestly not sure. Certainly not. I've not personally spoken to that developer. I have spoken to some others. But Paul, do you happen to know? We can find out otherwise. But you know, I mean, I suppose what I would say is it would be great if they got in touch, and we'll happily speak to them and tell them about the proposals.
May I respectfully suggest, Ian, that you are incumbent to contact the developers. Putting it out there on the internet or sending glossy brochures out doesn't mean to say that people log on or read them. And when it comes to a massive development like St. Neots East, as I said, the 3,800 houses are going up. If I was going to buy one of those houses, I probably wouldn't do it if I knew there was a rail overpass.
Hmm. Paul, do you know whether we've been in touch?
We haven't been in touch with the developer, and the Wintringham development we are aware of. So at the moment, this is a point where we've got a couple of viaducts that are going over the existing roads next to the proposed new A428. So the one in particular, I think, Paul, that you're referring to is the one, the closest one, which is at the corner where the new 428 meets the old 428. The first thing I would like to say is we appreciate that these viaducts are quite tall, but they're not 36 meters tall. They are ranging to about maximum of 12, 13, 14 meters tall.
Sorry, Paul, I got my units wrong. And your brochure says 11-meter high, and not,
and 36 feet,
Probably
39 feet, which is the height of 3 double-decker buses. Let's be absolutely clear about that, yeah? 39 feet, okay. That's not small, yeah?
No, it's not. No, it's not. What we have to do with the railway is we have to deal with gradients, which we can't go and move or shift in a very small area. But I can tell you specifically in this zone, this is an area where we are looking at the opportunity to be able to bring the railway down to a lower level, similar to the new A428 level, and put some of those junctions over the top of the railway. So this is an area where we think that we can bring some genuine value management improvements and lower the railway at that location. At the moment, this had to be designed without being overly optimistic as to what we could achieve in these zones, particularly given the timescales that we've been delivering the designs. And it's important that now that we've got some more detailed information on things like new A428 proposals with their DCO submission, we can now look to see how we can lower that railway within that area. Specifically where we're talking about just east of Wintringham, the railway, if the railway follows that route by the new 428, then it will be sat between the old 428 and the new 428. And Wintringham will then be west of that location. So if we are able to bring that railway down towards near the new A428 level, I think and certainly with our plans for things like noise mitigation, should it be required, and visual mitigation, I think that the impacts on that development could be significantly minimized. The development already has as well the East Coast Main Line on its west side. So it's sandwiched between the A428 and the East Coast Main Line. And we're making sure that we get the railway close to the new A428 alignment. So we're bringing it as far away between those two bits of infrastructure as we can from Wintringham.
Thank you, Paul. Next question, Stephen, who was next on the list.
I just want, well, this isn't a question, but I wanted to add to what Paul said, that the absurdity that we're building a huge strategic development on the east of St Neots of 3,800 homes with one of the biggest developers in the region. Councillor Hawkins was rightly outraged by 150 homes at Bourne, but 3,800 homes, which are now, the developer was completely unaware until the consultation was launched about a 39-foot viaduct that runs along the complete length of development. I find that absurd. The other thing that I'm quite upset about is that the lovely glossy brochure which you put through everybody's doors does not contain any information about the vertical alignment. I'm the person who found that out and spread that information to the press because it's buried deep inside the online consultation documents, but it's not part of the consultation. So I think it's completely unreasonable to expect residents to make a decision on a two-dimensional plot of a railway, which most people will assume, like you mentioned, the East Coast Main Line also goes through our development, but it goes through in a cutting. And there's a significant difference. I'm an engineer. There's a significant difference between a railway line going through a cutting and one on a potentially 39-foot viaduct. So I find that I don't think that anybody can make a fair judgment about route choices without that information. The other point I wanted to make, which is even more significant, I think, is you said that you highly value our feedback. Now, I'm a town councillor and the mayor of St Neots, but I'm also a county councillor. This consultation was launched during the middle of an election campaign, and then directly after that election campaign, the legislation expired, which allowed us to meet online. So many parish councils, town councils, and indeed the county council cannot legally meet or safely meet during the period of this consultation. So the chances are is that you will not get a response to this consultation from Cambridgeshire County Council. Now think about that. The railway line is running through our county, and the county council will not be responding to this consultation because they're not allowed to meet or safely or easily during this pandemic and because of the expiration of the legislation. You probably will get a response from St Neots Town Council, but it's going to be very difficult for us to do because we cannot legally meet and vote at the moment. So the period of the consultation is farcical and doesn't give town, parish and even county councils and potentially district council a fair opportunity to comment on these plans. And I just think the whole thing is ridiculous.
Actually, could I comment on that? You can legally meet. It may be that you don't want to meet because you have to meet.
That's not the case. That's not the case.
No, it's not true. I'm
not having that argument here. There's many town councils and the county council have the hoops that people have to jump through in order to meet at the moment. Yeah, are very difficult.
No, they're not. You just have to space it out and do it sensibly. Look, listen to me. I'm the vice chairman of a parish council. We have met in person. I know a county council is a bigger thing, but the point is you cannot say you cannot legally meet. That is wrong. You can if you follow the rules.
I mean, there's tons of online debate about this. I'm not prepared to get it. So you can contact me afterwards and we'll have a long discussion if you want. But that's
no, you're wrong. That's simply what I'm saying.
Can we just let the EWR people comment on this, please?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to get further into the debate about what legally can and can't be done. But you know what I would say is we have followed very carefully the guidance that's been made available. You know, we have to move on with the scheme. There isn't real clarity on when normal, whatever normal now looks like, conditions are going to resume again. And what we have done is made sure that, you know, recognising that we were going to span a local election time.
Why? But why? Why then? Why choose that time?
Why? Well, because we are at a point in the development of the scheme where it was appropriate to come and consult. So, you know, you
couldn't have delayed it for a few weeks.
Because a statutory consultation of that would have been illegal. I mean,
we extended it for a few weeks. Actually, that was the point. So we made sure that we gave sufficient time after the elections for people to comment. So, you know, we could in theory have finished it a little sooner. It felt very sensible to us to give a sensible period beyond the end of the elections to allow people to consider what we were saying. As far as the statutory consultation is concerned, you know, we do need to look at the timing of that in respect of local and national elections, but you know, we will address that when the time comes. Again, you know, we want a good consultation. We're not trying to consult in a way that minimises feedback. Quite the reverse. We want to generate as much feedback as you're able to give us, because we need to hear your views. You know, so we feel we have. Actually, we've had a huge response from residents, from industry bodies, and you know, and from councils, parish councils, and county councils.
You won't get a response from this county council. So you know, that I think it's absurd.
If I may clarify that point, and kind of more widely in cases, in those instances where a party has requested an extension to the deadline with kind of like a justification of what that could be. For example, we've had from some local authority reference of like, we are holding the meeting to discuss this right before the consultation or right after the end of the consultation. Can we submit it later? We can review that, and so far where the reasoning that has been provided has been found fair, that's been considered, and I could take away, but I'm pretty 100% sure that Cambridge here County Council has committed to providing a response to the consultation, but I could confirm that offline.
Can you confirm why the vertical alignments weren't included in the consultation documents?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you look at the information we published online, when you get into the detailed report, you do get that information. So I'm sorry, it's not, you know, you didn't think it was sufficiently clear from the summary document, but we did try to signpost other sources of information from that, and you know, to be perfectly honest, we tried to keep the summary document down to a reasonable sized publication, which was sufficient to give an overview of the scheme, not all the detail. You know, the green document I just showed you does give a lot more detail, but also we wanted to make sure from the summary document you at least you at least got the pointers in the right direction. So, you know, hopefully most people will find that detailed information if they spend a bit of time looking for it. And it's not that we, you know, it's absolutely not that we're trying to conceal anything. It's just simply, you know, the summary document is there to give an overview. The technical report is there to provide all of the detail. And I suppose there is another thing on this, Stephen, which is, you know, the alignment, the horizontal and vertical alignment, are not 100% finalised yet. We're still working on them. So, you know, you raise the point about the height of the structures. Well, you know, it's a good time to be having that conversation, because it's something we can continue to look at. And actually, through the A428 corridor, what we're trying to do is to work with Highways England to get the best compromise between our scheme and theirs. And you know, hopefully through working with them, it will allow us to come up with an alignment which is more sympathetic to their scheme and to the surrounding area, which is why we're talking to them on a pretty regular basis now to make sure that they're not designing something which, because they're 2 years ahead of us, they're into their detailed design. What we don't want to do is sit back and let them design a scheme which then makes it very difficult for us to fit the railway into the environment. So, you know, we're trying to do as much as we can to blend the railway into the environment. But look, you know, we recognise that it's very difficult to build a railway of this scale without having any impact at all and without it being visible. So, you know, all I can say is genuinely we are trying to minimise that impact as much as we can.
Brilliant, thanks, Ian. Jeff has had his hand raised up for quite a while. Jeff, go ahead, please.
Yes. Can you tell me where is Cambourne North?
Well, yeah, I can. So it's immediately to the north of the A428 at Caxton Gibbet.
It's a reference. It's a reference to the station location as opposed to a Camborne, a station to the south of Campbell.
Yeah, we've called one Camborne North and the other Camborne South. I mean, one is just to the north of the A428, which is what we describe as Camborne North.
Oh, you mean Knapwell?
Pardon?
You mean Knapwell?
Well, we mean the area immediately north of the A428, yeah.
Which is Knapwell,
mm-hmm.
Which is where I live.
Okay.
It's not Camborne North. There is no such place. It's called Knapwell.
You're right. There's not a place called Camborne North. It's simply a descriptor we're using to differentiate the two options for the railway station. The other one, obviously, we've talked about Camborne South, which actually it's more sort of southwest, really.
Well, let me tell you about Knapwell. There's about 40 houses here and slightly less than 100 people. We don't need a station, thank you very much.
Okay. So the station is provided for the benefit of the whole settlement around Camborne.
Well, why don't you put it in Camborne then?
Well, there are two options.
Not in Knapwell.
There are two options, aren't there? There's also a Camborne southwest, if you like, which is the other side of the settlement. So what we're looking at are possible locations in which we can place a station.
The only reason, now let me put it this way, if the people of Camborne want a train and want a station to enable them to get to Cambridge, it should go in Camborne, not in Knapwell.
Mm-hmm.
If you put a station in Knapwell, two things will happen. One is that you'll have to build a huge park and ride, and everybody from Camborne will have to get on their bikes or in their cars and drive to the park and ride to get on a train. The second thing that will happen is that everyone in the development world will see a great opportunity to build a huge new town in my little parish. What do you say to that? I know it's on page 17 of your consultation document, so you're very well aware of what you're doing in an area of best landscape.
Well, it is one of a couple of locations that we're proposing. You know,
it's your preferred route, emerging preference.
Mm-hmm.
Routes 1 and 9, emerging preference. It wasn't even on your radar before last October. It was never in Route E.
We've responded to we've responded to a couple of things, actually. We've responded to the fact that the A428 proposal, the Highways England proposal, does provide a natural corridor to follow. And of course, that
didn't
means
it when you first went out in 2019?
Well, no,
wasn't it on the cards then? Yes, it was.
No, it wasn't. So
yes, it was. I'm a highway engineer. Don't try and BS me.
So so am I, actually. But it was at an earlier stage of its development. So it was it had not been announced as the preferred route. Was it on the cards as an option? Yes, it was. So one of the factors that has influenced our decision is the route of the A428. That's for sure. That still leaves us with two options, one of which is to create the station, as you say, north of Camborne. The other is to create a station further southwest of Camborne. Those are still options. So, you know, our view, based on guidance we're getting from other government departments, you know, MHCLG and others, is that there is a logic in building a station to the north of Camborne, but you know, both of those options are still amongst our routes that we're presenting to you. So, you know, if you clearly have a preference, which is for Cambourne South, you should write to us and explain why.
I don't think you should have referred to those alignments as emerging preferences. You shouldn't have even have included them in your consultation document. Quite frankly, it was totally wrong of you.
Why is that, sorry?
Why? Because they were never in the original consultation document. You've only been pressurised into including them now by the NIMBYs in the south.
Well, that's not true. When we published route alignment, route option E, which is the sort of shaded area, it's an area rather than a specific route alignment, isn't it? We were obliged then, as the next stage in the process, to look at options either in or close to that route, and a route following the A428 does offer a lot of benefits. I'm afraid there's no getting away from the fact that there isn't, in lots of respects, both from an environmental perspective to a cost perspective, there are benefits in following an existing, well, it's not existing yet, but it will be, subject to Highways England's DCO being successful, but a recognised transport corridor. So that's why we've looked at that as an option, not because we've responded to pressure in that sense. Although there is public opinion, that it is very evident that there is public opinion in favour of that route.
Yes, they've had 2 years. They've had two. Ian, they've had 2 years to gear up for this, for their pressure. We've had 2 weeks since we've learned about your emerging preferences. We've had since what, April the 10th, when we've got our documents through the door. That was the first inkling we ever had.
Okay.
They've had 2 years to gear up for their pressure, and they've been applying it ever since through their politicians, who, incidentally, all live down there.
Okay, Paul. Yeah,
there's a strange thing, isn't it? Not in my backyard. Ian, I invite you and Paul and Geordie to come and visit. Come and see me in my parish. Come and visit us.
Okay,
we'll make you very welcome, and we'll show you around and show you the despoilation that you're going to create if you put a station in our parish. Desecration. It's incredibly difficult to contemplate. Please do take up my invitation.
Okay.
And Peter Deere will join me in inviting you, won't you, Peter? And Chris.
Okay.
Jeff, I would like to just reiterate further. I mean, that's why we are going out to consultation now with all 5 options. I get your point in terms of the emerging preference piece and what's been written, but it is important that you can go and talk about those other 3 alignment options that take different routes. Alignment 2 has benefits to it, and that it follows the new A428 and then goes to a station south of the Cambourne location, for example. That's genuinely why there are options on the table, and even with the writing of the emerging preference, that hasn't swayed the response document in terms of how it should be answered. And please, all I can recommend is please do put your voices. Make your voices heard formally through the consultation process.
Paul, that is another thing that really worries us in the north. We don't have many voices, and we've been told, somebody else has asked this question in the chat room. In fact, a number of people have asked this. Are you counting voices? Because we've only got a few.
No, so actually we should make clear, this is not about, it's not a vote. So, you won't have your voice will be heard just as much as any other valid comment. It's not about, us weighing up the number of responses we get from a particular section of the community or a particular group of people. This is about, trying to get an unbiased view from the communities that would be affected by the various route alignments. And just to reinforce what Paul has just said, we've published 5 options, genuinely because we want to consult on those 5. We haven't ruled any out at all. It is generally good practice to present an emerging preference at this stage, just to really give you an indication of where our thinking is. But if you don't agree, then you absolutely should tell us you don't agree. I mean, you are telling us that you don't agree, but put it in writing, because it's more powerful if you write to us. Just make that point, and we'll make a decision based on as rich an understanding of the situation as we can get. So we're doing consultation is one element of the process. We're also carrying out environmental surveys to try and understand the nature of the environment that we're passing through, and we're doing other desk studies as well. Not least of which to understand about the physical conditions that we have to pass through to try and minimise the impact on the surrounding area through topography and so on. So, but you absolutely should explain to us the position, and your comments won't be ignored because you're a small community. We'll assess all the comments that come back on the basis of their validity to the decisions that we're trying to make, to be honest.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Ian. Just conscious that we've overrun by quite a lot, so apologies about that, because I'm aware that we're stealing quite a lot of your time and evening. But before we draw to a close, just to quickly touch on a couple of questions that have been raised, which I think we can address quickly. And also I'm aware that Richard West has his hand up, and we can also quickly go to him. But so James Cadmer asked earlier, how are you going to create last mile links to villages not that close to the stations? I'm a councillor for Great Cranston and we're keen to have a good all-weather cycle route to the stations using the existing Riddle path. Ian.
All right. Well, look, I mean, the way we go about gaining planning consent for our railway is that we have to demonstrate a need for the scheme and for the route that we're choosing for us. We also have to demonstrate that the land that we take, we absolutely need to build the scheme. So what we can't very easily do is create new routes that are away from the railway. What we can do is work with parishes and local authorities to encourage the development of those routes, and we will, because for us it's not just about building a piece of infrastructure and kind of saying, here you go, here's your railway. It's about creating a new form of connectivity that's the best fit for the communities that it passes through. So we absolutely want to have those conversations with local authorities and those who can provide planning consent for other cycleways, pedestrian routes and so on. What we can do to play our part is firstly have those conversations, obviously, but also to make sure that we've got the facilities at the stations that are appropriate to the routes that we're trying to encourage others to create. So, having good cycle facilities at stations obviously will encourage people to cycle to the stations. We are looking at other things like whether we can potentially create some cycle routes along the railway. And again, we are limited by what you can do under the Planning Act. But if it's possible to do that as part of the landscape scheme that we create around the railway, because we do have rights to landscape to try and fit the railway into the topography, then we'll do what we can. But as I say, very much what we're trying to do is create a solution which provides the best fit for the communities. So whilst we can't, our development rights are quite limited really to the railway itself. There's plenty of people we can work with to try and provide a wider influence into the areas around the stations and along the route.
We have the bridle path already. It just needs turning into all weather. At the moment, the mountain bike in the summer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for us, it's probably really a question of having the right conversations with the local authority, the planning authorities, really, to just encourage, those last mile, first mile connections, because that's what makes the railway a more successful venture, and it's what gives it more value to the communities that it's part of.
Brilliant. Which actually, thanks, Ian. Which that point actually bodes very well with the next question that I was going to address, which Tumi submitted earlier. Well, like she actually raised it, we didn't get to cover it, which was if we are talking to the greater Cambridge partnership about Cambourne to Cambridge busway or not. And Paul, who I believe like you own that relationship, I suppose you can tackle that directly.
Yes, so we have had conversations with a number of the projects, but particularly with C2C and CSET to the south, just to make sure that we're coordinated. The C2C conversations have been, and there hasn't been much going on that recently. There's been more on the CSET side to the south of Cambridge South Station area and the biomedical campus. But we are in communication.
We also had a conversation, I think it was last week or the week before, with Cambridge Autonomous Metro, just to understand, obviously things have changed slightly for that project. So we just spoken to them very recently just to understand what that means.
It's been canned, hasn't it?
Well, not entirely, I don't think. I don't think it's quite as simple as that, on the sound of it.
Well, the mayor said he's not interested in it, and he's not going to do it.
Yeah.
My concern is the effect of your project on the Cambon to Cambridge busway, because that is linked to the delivery of Bonn Airfield. And, it's still not clear exactly what is going on. If you haven't spoken to the GCP lately, I mean, how lately is lately? It's like, what the heck?
Last week. So one of the things that we have established early on with GCP and the C2C project is we understand the importance of multimodal transport. And what I mean by that is making sure that the bus and the railway can link together, provide a genuine link, thinking about timetables as well. So when we were just talking about the first mile, last mile piece, it's important that we do try to get as many people out of their cars and using public transport and active travel. And C2C is part of that, or could be part of that. So that is a conversation that has started. Their project hasn't been progressing quite so fast, so the conversation hasn't gone much further than that at this point in time. But we would certainly be looking to integrate and coordinate rather than disrupt each other.
Brilliant, thanks, Paul. And then before we draw this session to a close, I'm mindful that Richard has had his hand up for quite a while. Richard, please.
Thank you very much indeed. I hope you think of this as being a critical friend. I do feel there's two things driving this. At the end of the day, you need to consultation. It's a legal requirement that I understand. You've got to go through certain bits and pieces before you come to the final planning delivery. But I think it will come down to two things, and I think the Natwell gentleman really sums it up. I feel it's coming down to housing development. It seems probably if you do get a park and ride at Natwell, you'll probably get some housing as well. It does seem to be driven by economic development, which should be housing development. And also it seems to me you'll have to drive it by economic necessity. And I think this is the reason why I make a plea to you tonight We can talk about consultation, about what you want, but I do think we need to be fair with our residents and say to the residents of St Neots, you'll get this viaduct. Say to the village residents that we're going to destroy your historic landscape. Let us be fair to our residents. Let us get to the point of impact. That's what residents really care about. And this, I know you've got to go through this consultation. I play my full part in it, and I should be answering your consultation this weekend, I promise. But at the same time, we do need to know about impact as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
No, thanks for your feedback, Richard. And I mean, you know, at the next stage of consultation, we will have a lot more information to share with you. So, as I say, we've genuinely provided you with as much information as we have at the moment. Our consultation report is a pretty good summary of where the project has got to in terms of the information that we've developed so far. But you know, we're doing a lot of survey work. There has been a massive response to this consultation, almost an unprecedented level of feedback, which is exactly what we need really to help form future opinions. I appreciate this. You know, there are gaps in what we've provided because we can only share with you what we've done so far. But I hope you'll bear with us and, you know, recognise that that we're being as open as we can be, and that when more information is available, we will share it with you. We're not trying to keep anything back from you.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Ian. So mindful, that we're well beyond the watershed. That should we draw this session to close? In case that there are any other questions that might arise on the back of this session, Ian is going to cover that in a second. But please email them to contact@eastwestrail.co.uk. And if we can have the slides back, and Ian, you can draw the session to close.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Are we going to put some slides back up?
Mindful that we might not, if not, if you can just, let's do it without slides.
Yeah, sure. So just to reiterate what Geordie said, thank you. It's me, my phone. Just to reiterate what Geordie said, thank you so much for your time this evening. I do appreciate that you've given up your evening to talk to us. In terms of the, let's find the right slide then. Okay, maybe this is the right slide. So, you know, in terms of further information, please get in touch with us. As I say, though, we have tried to give you as much information as we have available at this stage. Sorry, somebody really wants to get hold of me tonight. Look, please try and join our live chat events if you can over the next few days. We've provided further details of that. As I mentioned earlier, the next stage for us is to announce a preferred route once the consultation report is published. So we'll do that first. And the next stage of consultation, as I mentioned earlier, is what's referred to as the statutory consultation. So this consultation hasn't been a legal requirement actually, but the next one will be. And that's the point at which we'll share with you our latest thinking on the route that we announce. And then, as I say, we will continue to complete a DCO application. That will be submitted to the Planning Inspectorate, will appear on their website, and obviously we'll provide information on ours as well. And then in due course, there will be an examination. It's usually about 6 months or so after the application is submitted. And then there's a final opportunity for you to make your views known. So there are quite a few other points at which you can get involved, but also, you know, please keep in touch with us in between the consultations, because we'd still like to hear from you. And you know, frankly, your understanding of the local environment is always going to be better than ours. So it's really important that you keep talking to us. And I think we'll leave it there for tonight, Geordie. You may want to say a few words just to round off, but for me, as I say, thank you so much for your time this evening, and we appreciate you giving up your evening to listen to what we've got to say and to share your thoughts with us. Geordie?
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, just to echo exactly what you've said, and just like a final reminder about the live chat sessions, in case you want to further speak to some of us the next couple of weeks, and also, yeah, like contact at eastwestrail.co.uk for any questions, as well as the telephone number there. And thank you very much for joining us tonight, and apologies again for having overrun by quite a lot of time, but we really hope that you found it a useful session. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.